I developed another interpretation of the quantum theory, which I had then called the causal interpretation. The concepts of quantum theory that I'm developing may come closer to ordinary experience than classical physics does. We find that particles in certain circumstances can apparently act on each other at long distances, directly faster than light. We don't have a new paradigm yet. You see, people talk about it, but there isn't one. You see, it depends on how you use the word paradigm. Now, the way Thomas Kuhn meant was that it was a sort of a general set of concepts which were accepted by most people, and practices and things they would pick up as an apprenticeship in graduate school and so on, subliminally. And we have a few people who are suggesting new ideas. The paradigm would only come if the majority of physicists were to take them up and were to be teaching them in graduate school and writing papers about them and so on. If you want to understand it, you have got to change your approach. If you're satisfied to calculate, you don't have to change it at all, of course.
But do you see any signs around you, not just in physics, but do you see any signs around you in the world?
Well, I see a lot of signs in the world at large that people are thinking about this, many people, and suggesting it outside of physics. I think many people outside of physics would welcome this, but physicists at the present moment are generally holding on. I started out, writing a book on quantum theory where I tried to explain Bohr's point of view, and when I finished, I felt I hadn't understood it that well. I began to think again, and I had two ideas, you see. Well, the first idea was that you had a wave coming in. You see, a quantum theory, a typical experiment is an electron comes in and scatters off a particle. And you think of it as a wave coming in and scattering, but then you still detect a particle, you see, so how does that come about? So I said, there's a second wave coming in from infinity to where you detect the particle. But then that suggests that spreads out, and then it becomes a third wave and a fourth wave. So you have a whole series. The particle is not an actually solid object, but a series of steps very close to each other, a dynamic process. And I think we in the West have changed our view of reality over the past 1,000 years radically. 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, it may have been closer to these other more tribes, primitive people, as you call them. Our views of reality are constantly changing, you see, and they will change again in a century from now. Now, later on, I came to the idea in the 60s more definitely, and we can take, there are two examples. The implicate order means enfolded order. Now, an example of enfoldment, a very simple example, is to fold up a piece of paper many, many times and make a few cuts in it. When you unfold it, you see a pattern, right? The idea is that somehow the things that we see in front of us, which I call explicate or unfolded, are the unfoldment of a deeper pattern that is not visible. I think that ethics has this inherent difficulty in that if you make it absolute, it's arbitrary, it becomes dangerous, and if you make it relative, it's dangerous. And anyway, even if you say everything is relative, that is an absolute statement, again, a contradiction. So we appear to be in a difficult situation there. Now, I think there's nothing that can replace clarity. You see, if people are not clear, if they're incoherent and confused, then whatever you say is not going to work. You're not under any pressure, you're free, right? You don't try to hold on to your identity or try to get rid of it. See, that's a side issue. We are really trying to communicate. See, I like to give the example of the first people who climbed Mount Everest. Not that I think it was a wonderful thing to do, but in order to do it, they had to go through all sorts of things with great energy, and if they hadn't sustained it, they would not have done it. You see, now, I don't think they were thinking of identity or non-identity or anything like that. They were thinking, we want to get to the top of the mountain, right? I think it's inherent in thought that thought tends to produce incoherence the way we're working it now because we are not very clear about what we're doing, you see. And I'm not saying that we should get perfect coherence. We'll never get that. But we have to have an attitude of moving toward coherence when we see incoherence. But if we have an attitude of defending incoherence, then that will be very destructive, you see. And I think you will see that people generally do find themselves defending their incoherence.